Tariq Abu Qadir is back in the U.S. after finding himself at the epicenter of the violent conflict that is now engulfing Israel, Gaza, and the Middle East. The 15-year-old American touched down in Tampa, Florida on Wednesday, returning from what started as a simple family vacation, a trip to Israel and the West Bank with his parents and sisters to spend the summer with their extended Palestinian family. The story of how Tariq's summer vacation became the subject of international diplomacy is the story of the run-up to the conflict that's raging on in Gaza right now as I speak. It all started with the disappearance of 3 Israeli yeshiva students in June. They were kidnapped while hitchhiking in the West Bank, leading to a massive manhunt for the Hamas militants presumed by the Israeli government to be responsible. 3 weeks later, the 3 Israeli teens were found dead, and amid outrage in Israel and widespread calls for revenge, a 16-year-old boy, Palestinian named Mohammed Abu Qadir, went missing from the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Shafat. His body was found later that day, and an autopsy showed he had been beaten and burned alive. 3 Israelis confessed to carrying out the murder in retaliation for the deaths of those 3 Israelis. The suspects were indicted last week. Mohammed Abu Qadir, the boy who was burned to death, was Tariq Abu Qadir's cousin. And on the following day, amid clashes in East Jerusalem sparked by Palestinian anger over the murder, Tariq was apprehended by Israeli police and brutally beaten. The whole incident, as you can see, caught on tape. After international outcry and intervention by the State Department, he was released from police custody and held under house arrest in the West Bank for 9 days. No charges were filed, and on Wednesday, Tariq Abu Qadir returned back to the United States. And Tariq Abu Qadir and his mother, Suha Abu Qadir, join me now. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
Tariq, let me start with you. You went to East Jerusalem for a family vacation. Before all this happened, what was it like?
It was actually really fun. I had made a lot of friends, and actually the first day I went there was like a party, and I met Mohammed at that party, and he was like my first friend, so we hung out a lot from that point.
You were hanging out in East Jerusalem, a couple of 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys in the summer hanging out, right?
Yeah.
You guys were going there, it'd been a while, right, since the family had been there? You have family there?
Yes, it'd been 11 years. I was going to change my mind just because, you know, financially right now, you know, everybody's in kind of a,
Yeah.
you know. But Tariq really wanted to go visit his family over there. And so he kind of convinced.
And you hadn't spent much time over there, right? It had been since you were 4, is that right?
Since 4.
Yeah, the last time I have gone there was when I was 4 years old, and I missed everybody.
Mohammed, you obviously probably following the news about what's going on in Israel. There's a widespread outrage about the kidnapping and death of these 3 Israeli students. What happened how did you know when Mohammed had gone missing?
Well, that night we were all together, me, Mohammed, and all my other cousins. We were together playing games, right? Until
like video games or?
No, games as in like we were like playing board games, right? So after I left him to come back, because usually in Ramadan we have to like eat late at night so we can fast during the day.
So there's a big meal to break the fast at night after sundown, right?
Yeah. So I went out and I wanted to go to the bakery, and I walked by Mohammed, and he was just sitting by himself. And I asked him if he wanted anything from the bakery, and he was like, yeah, sure. And I went to the bakery, and I came back 5 minutes later, and I found a cop car there. What happened was I walked towards the cop car, and they didn't let me get any closer until I knew there was a problem, and I did not see Mohammed there. And that's how it started. So I called my family, and everybody came.
So he had been taken, right? At this point,
he had been abducted.
He had been abducted,
right.
And did you know this? Did it circulate through the family very quickly, Suha?
Actually, yes. Once we got word of someone in the family being abducted, we had no idea who it was. Until we finally found out that it was Mohammed. And I knew that he'd been with him earlier that night. And I got really worried, you know. Yeah. I didn't know what to expect. And everybody just gathered to find out, you know, was he alive? Was he dead?
Tariq, when did you learn what had happened?
Well, until I called my family, and when I called my family, they all came, and then more cops came to the scene. So, and then I went and I saw the cameras in the store, in front of the store, and we all saw 2 cars show up and kidnap Muhammad.
You saw on the videotape that the camera
yes.
that the stores had taken that 2 cars had come and abducted him.
And abducted him. And then when everybody got down and wanted to see what happened, like at that point we were running out of time, and we all knew that, and we were telling the cops, like, at this point we were losing time, and the more time we waste, the more time he has, like the more time that they have to try to kill him.
You all knew essentially immediately something terrible had happened.
Yeah.
That he'd been taken, and against the backdrop of what was happening in Israel at that point, there was some suspicion. There was a very intense atmosphere.
We figured that something terrible was going to happen to him. There was no way that they were going to, let him go.
And when did you? And then later that day, you found out.
Well, I was actually one of the first people to find out that he was kidnapped, until I called my family and everybody came. Like, they were asking, my family was asking me, where was I? I'm like, I'm outside and I need everybody to come down because there's a problem. And then after that, when the cops came and my family went down, we were talking to the cops. Then they said they sent a helicopter to see where they were. Then things escalated.
I want to talk to you about what happened after the news of his death spread and the protests in East Jerusalem, and what happened with you and the cops. We're going to take a break and talk about that after the break, all right?
Sure.
We're back. I'm here with Tariq Qadir and his mother, Suha Qadir. And you were in East Jerusalem. It's the eastern part of Jerusalem. It's the part controlled by the Palestinian Authority. It's part of the West Bank. But it's just right on the border with Israel, and there's actually fairly easy movement between the two, which is part of what led to what happened. Your cousin is abducted. You find out, the word comes in that he has been killed. And there are street protests. There's a lot of anger. When you are taken by the Israeli police, tell me what the scene is like. Why are you out in the street? There were some people who were looking at this tape of you and they were saying, well, he must have been up to no good. There were people throwing rocks. What were you doing out there?
Well, I was watching everything because at that point I really wanted to know where my cousin was, and I was speechless. I couldn't realize, is this really happening? I wanted to know. Like, I couldn't go back inside because I wanted to know. I was watching the police come and more police, and then they bring the military cars. And when that happened, I started to get scared on the inside because I was like, there's something really scary gonna happen.
So where were you and when we see that video of you with the police? What was happening at that moment?
Well, at that moment, I was in an alley watching from the side view of the protest.
And the protest, his death had been announced. People were protesting in response to that, right? There were protests on the street. There were people chanting. There were people throwing rocks. There was clashes back and forth, correct?
At that point, I was watching, and there were people around me. It just that at that point, they surrounded all of us. So like we had no way out.
So you were with a bunch of other people?
Yes, but these other people that were with me, they were watching too. Like we were like at this point, there were some people that did some bad things and took some bad choices. And at that point, there were some people that wanted to understand what's going on and why is it happening to us. Right, and so I looked to my left and I saw some people running and screaming, and behind them I saw soldiers, and so everybody panicked and they're like, there's soldiers. Some people left the alley and some people jumped the fence, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to get out the way, so I jumped the fence and I fell at the fence. I fell out over the fence, and I ran a little further, and they grabbed me and slammed me on the floor, and I was screaming because I was confused at that point. I'm like I didn't know what was happening to me. I thought I was dreaming, and then they kept beating me, and I was screaming, and I was awake the half of the time. And then they kept kicking me in the face, and I kept screaming at them while they were kicking me and punching me in the face, and then they kicked me in the ribs, and they kept getting like fierce. So at that, and then no, while they were beating me, I couldn't have a chance to move because they zip tied my arms together, and then they started beating me.
You can see where.
So when did you hear about what had happened to your son?
Well, I was at my cousin's house mourning the death of her son, and the whole family was there. I didn't hear right away. Like, there was some talk of, some kids, being arrested, and I just, I didn't really mind that, like, not thinking,
Right.
my son, but I was concerned at the same time. I'm like, why are they arresting the kids, So my uncle came to me and he said, your son's in jail. And I was shocked. I was, I didn't want to believe it, because he's a kind of a jokester, sometimes, like my uncle.
Right.
I mean, so until my other cousin came in, and then she told me, yeah, he's in jail.
He was released from jail. How long were you in jail?
For, I think, 4 days.
4 days, released after the State Department had expressed concern, after the tape was made public, right? That was made public. The State Department expressed concern. You were then released only after that, right?
Right.
On house arrest for 9 days.
Yes.
Were you charged with anything?
Well, at that point, I didn't know what was happening. I just heard from my mom that you're gonna be on house arrest. You're gonna be far away from the town. You can't be with your family. And I was like, at that point, I didn't know what to do. Like, my vacation has been ruined, and everything was just wrong.
How did this? Was Tariq charged?
No,
he was not charged.
Charged with anything.
He was released with no
That's what I was
charges.
confused about. I mean, I was in the courtroom, and I thought he was just going to be released, having the U.S. consular right next to me. And then all of a sudden, she's like, he's going to be on house arrest for 9 days with a bail as
And
well.
after that 9 days release, there are no charges.
No charges.
Outstanding. You are now home. Your family is still in East Jerusalem.
Yes.
And still living with the reverberating repercussions of what is turning into a brutally ugly summer.
I mean, this happens to Palestinians every day. Tariq was just one of the lucky ones that happened to be a U.S. citizen, and somebody happened to get it on tape as well. So this is like a normal occurring, thing every day that happens to the Palestinian people.
What did you learn this summer? What do you take away from all this?
Well, after all that happened to me, at that point, I was like, I just got a taste of what they're going through. What happened to me was just a little. Like, what they're going through, they have people dying in Gaza, and they have people dying and suffering. They're being kicked out of their homes. It's tough over there.
Tariq Abu Qadir and Suha Qadir, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story, and best of luck the rest of the summer, Tariq, all right? Stay safe. We did that interview an hour ago. I'm still struck by the poise of that young man. I should note that there is tremendous poise and grace exhibited by the families of the 3 Israelis who were murdered, those yeshiva students, some calling for empathy in the face of terrible, terrible reprisal and violence over there. It's tough over there, as Tariq said. That is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Remarkable interview. That was amazing.
Thank you.